stuck at rank E. Bayer loudly and discontentedly tells them to stop. Rude didn't say anything bad. He may not be happy about it, but he agrees with the guys. At this rate, they won't see any prey, so it's time for them to go down. They go towards the stairs leading down, and go down to the 4th floor of the Avilio labyrinth. Rude looks ahead with fear in his eyes and sees a monster about to attack him. Rick, with a satisfied face, manages to come to the rescue and strikes the monster. He turns around and asks why he twitches from every small monster. Sasha, with an evil grin on her face, delivers an electric shock to the monster with her staff. Bayer takes advantage of the moment and chops off the monster's head. Rude watches what is happening and thinks that they are very strong, and he is not even able to move. Bayer finishes off the remaining monsters with his sword, and Sasha says that it is good that they decided to come down here. Fewer people, more oxygen. Bayer looks at the glowing ring on his finger and says that the monsters here are not that strong, and they finally found treasure. Rick looks at Rude and loudly tells him to collect things from the monsters he killed. Rude wipes his forehead and says that he can't, their skins are too damaged. He thinks there isn't even a magic stone left. Rick looks at him with an angry expression and asks, what if that's not true? Is the picker slacking off? Rude clenches his fist in displeasure and says that he will do it now. He looks at the dead monster and thinks that all his guts are outside and it stinks terribly. Why did he have to go so far? Rude looks at his finger from which the fire blew and wonders if he should set it on fire a little. Rick looks at him and mockingly asks that he decided to burn his monster. Is he really going to eat it? Although they have indeed been wandering for a long time, he is hungry. In such a situation, it is not surprising to stare at the monster's meat. Sasha looks at him and tells him to stop. This is very disgusting. She asks with a serious face that besides, this is a taboo, isn't it? If they absorb their mana, who knows what will happen to them? Rick replies with a smile on his face that he was just joking. When they return, he will eat his fill with the money he earned like it was his last time. The team panics and looks ahead questioningly. They cannot believe that a minotaur is standing in front of them. Rude clenches his teeth and thinks that this is a B-rank monster. What is a B-rank monster doing on such a simple floor? Rick and Sasha look ahead and say that there is no way they can defeat this. What should they do? Bayer turns around in horror and says loudly that Rude should give him his backpack. He wants to use the item from it. Bayer grabs his backpack and tells him to keep an eye on the minotaur. Rude agrees and asks if he has a plan. He swings his sword with an angry face and says that he has a plan. Bayer strikes Rude, leaving a large bleeding wound on his back. He calls out to the team as Rude falls to the ground in pain. Rick, with a satisfied grin, throws his axe next to Rude, using the combat stimulus skill, which draws the monster's attention to the target. Sasha, with a drop of sweat on her face and a smile, uses the acceleration skill, which doubles her movement speed. Rude lies on the ground and asks, did they really want to abandon him from the beginning? Bayer, with blood on his face and an evil smile, thinks that who in their right mind would agree to team up with an unclean picker? He and his team run in the other direction and loudly say goodbye to Rude. He closed his eyes and, bleeding, loudly says that he is very unhappy. He gets up from the ground and watches as the minotaur swings its axe at him. The monster strikes, but he manages to dodge. Rude, with beads of sweat on his face, looks ahead and thinks that he is about to be killed. The minotaur strikes Rude in the chest with his hand, causing him to fly into the wall. The stone surrounding him begins to crack and they fall down. Bloody Rude fell and wondered how he could have survived. Apparently, the minotaur's carcass softened his fall, but his death is only a matter of time. Even if he is lucky enough not to meet other monsters here, he will still die from blood loss or hunger before he can recover. He thinks about how hungry he is. Is there anything to eat? What is he thinking about? Rude doesn't know what will happen next. What if he tries to eat a monster? What a miserable life he has lived. Rude is surprised to see a white light in front of him, and memories come over him. An unknown person holds his hand on his shoulder and tells him that no matter how hard it is, he should never give up. Rude comes back from his memories and bites off a piece of flesh from a minotaur with an evil look. If a person with depleted mana tries the meat of a monster that is full of it, the monster's mana particles will leak into his body and monsterization will begin. This is a terrible fate, even worse than drinking poison in one gulp, so it is taboo. In order to replenish the blood loss and satisfy his hunger, Rude took a risk that led to an unexpected transformation. He staggered into the cave and saw a multitude of bats flying towards him with the intention of attacking. Enraged, Rude looked at them and used the roar skill, which stunned and intimidated the enemy. Half of the bats fell to the ground while the other half flew towards him. Rude used the strength gain skill, which temporarily increased the target's strength. He swung his axe and struck the monsters. Rude took a bat wing and bit off a piece of it. With a crazy smile on his face, he used the echolocation skill, which detects living creatures around and is effective even in the dark. Rude heard something and turned his head towards the sound. He thought that a whole bunch of monsters had come running and asked who was here who couldn't wait to become a snack. With bright yellow eyes, he furiously chopped off the arm and head of one of the monsters. Rude cuts down a tentacle monster and thinks that the axe fits perfectly in his hand, and he also feels the mana of the monsters without even looking at them. He swings the axe and cuts down another monster, eating its eye. Rude is bent over and with a bloody face thinks that every time he devours a monster, his body is filled with strength. With a furious smile and bright red eyes, he strikes the 4 monsters standing in front of him with an axe. After some time, a bloody Rude opens the gate of the labyrinth and looks ahead in bewilderment. He drops the axe and with beads of sweat on his face says loudly that he was able to get out and stay alive. Some time later, in the Adventurers Guild, a crowd of unknown people are looking at a white-haired elderly man in the center. He says with a serious face that he listened to their report and recalled all the adventurers who were there from the labyrinth. Lankers, the guild master of the Ballon branch, looks at Bayer and says that he has recalled everyone except Rudd, who was with them. Bayer looked down, clenched his teeth and said that the moment they encountered the Minotaur on the 4th floor and died, they didn't have a chance to help him. If only they could have noticed this freak earlier. Lockhars with a serious face says that he understood the situation. The guild worker leans on her hand with a sad look and says that they will impose a ban on entering the labyrinth. She gets up from her chair with a drop of sweat on her face and looks forward in surprise. The girl sees Rude opening the door and wonders, is this unclean picker, didn't he die? Lockhars and the team look at him in surprise. Bayer runs up to Rude, grabs his hands and loudly says that he is fine. He whispers in his ear that if he says anything, he will kill him. Rick with a smile on his face approaches Rude and asks if he is hurt. Sasha with a calm face says that they wanted to go back for him, but the labyrinth was immediately sealed. Rude stands still and watches as Bayer happily says that in any case, they need to celebrate his return. But perhaps it should be done elsewhere. The team with beads of sweat on their faces think that they cannot move. Rude with a serious face looks forward and loudly says that they used him as bait. Bayer stretches his hands forward and with a bead of sweat on his face asks what he is saying. Lockhars looks at him and asks what do you mean used as bait? Rude with a serious face says that Bayer took his backpack and hit him in the